The day Marcus Allison left work early to surprise his wife, he had no idea it would be the moment his entire world began to unravel. They had been married for 8 years, built a quiet life in a cozy home just outside Denver. Marcus, a lead software analyst at a fintech startup, had always prided himself on being dependable, maybe even boring, in the best way. And Claire, his wife, was the spark to his calm. Creative, unpredictable, with a laugh that used to light up every room. But something had changed. Her kisses became colder, her late nights more frequent. The woman who used to send him flirty texts by lunch was now barely replying by dinner. That afternoon, Marcus had no suspicion. He was only thinking of bringing her favorite wine and dinner from the place where they had their first anniversary. He wasn't prepared for what he'd find behind their front door. What he saw would burn into his memory, forever turning love into something sharp and dangerous. Marcus stepped into the house, arms full of dinner and a bottle of Chianti. The silence struck him first. Not the peaceful quiet he was used to, but a strange electric hush. Something unnatural. "Claire?" He called out, his voice echoing off the hallway walls. No answer. He set the food down on the kitchen counter, noticing her handbag tossed aside. Claire never left it like that. Her keys were still there, too. The wine glasses in the sink were 4 of them. Used, lipstick on 2. One wasn't Claire's color. A soft thump from upstairs made his heart hitch. He moved slowly, dread rising like a tide. With each step up the staircase, the sounds became clearer, muffled laughter. A woman's voice, Claire's, and others. Male voices, multiple. He didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But then he reached the bedroom door. It was ajar. Afternoon sunlight spilled through the crack in golden rays. And there on their bed was Claire, naked, not alone. 3 men, strangers. One of them tattooed, another with wild curly hair, and the third looked like he barely shaved. All of them too close, too intimate, on their bed. On his side of the bed, Marcus froze, the world spinning beneath his feet. He wasn't angry. Not yet. What he felt was cold. Like he'd stepped into a nightmare and couldn't wake up. And then Claire looked at him. She didn't scream, didn't cover herself. She just propped herself up on an elbow and said casually, "Oh, you're home early." Like he'd just walked in on her reading a magazine. The 3 men scrambled, grabbing clothes, muttering apologies, bumping into furniture in their haste to flee. Marcus barely registered them. He was locked onto Claire, his wife, his partner, his everything, sitting there like nothing was wrong. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, half laughing. "No?" he whispered. "Because it looks like you brought a circus into our bedroom." "I was going to tell you," she replied, slipping into her robe with no shame, no regret. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should try something different, something honest." His voice cracked. "You call this honest?" Claire shrugged. "I'm tired of pretending monogamy works. I love you, Marcus. But I want an open marriage." He stared at her, too stunned to speak. An open marriage. After 8 years of commitment, partnership, laughter, tears after they'd held each other through miscarriages, job losses, promotions, Sunday mornings in bed with coffee and crossword puzzles, this was what she offered? "You could have just divorced me," he whispered. "I don't want a divorce," she said with calm cruelty. "I want both. I want you and the freedom to be with others." The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was her serenity, her confidence, as if he was the one being unreasonable. In that moment, something in Marcus fractured. The version of himself who believed in love, in loyalty, in shared futures, died right there beside the bed. But what rose in its place wasn't weak. What rose was something patient, sharp, and unbreakable. Claire didn't realize it, but the game she'd just started, Marcus was already 10 moves ahead. For the next few weeks, Emily acted like she had just discovered a new religion. Her transformation was more than emotional, it was theatrical. She embraced the idea of her new liberated lifestyle with a kind of enthusiasm only someone drunk on control could muster. She wore brighter colors, laughed louder, and made a point to mention how free she felt at every dinner, brunch, and conversation. To anyone looking in from the outside, Emily was thriving. She smiled more often, spoke in motivational quotes, and claimed she and Michael had reached a new level of understanding. She even hosted a dinner party with her girlfriends Jessica, Megan, Sarah, and Rachel, all of whom were privy to her newest revelation. Open marriage was the future. Emily spoke like a prophet delivering gospel. Michael, meanwhile, played the perfect listener. He let Emily talk. Let her parade their new rules to her circle. Let her talk about sexual independence like she was discovering gravity. And through it all, he sat there, calm, sipping his wine, nodding when expected. None of them noticed that he wasn't following the script. What they didn't know, what Emily didn't know, was that Michael had no intention of just being the loyal husband standing on the sidelines of his wife's new adventure. No, he had watched her ignite the fire, and now he was letting it burn just long enough to warm the traps he'd been setting. See, Michael wasn't opposed to the idea of freedom. What he hated, what he despised, was being deceived. It wasn't just about sex. It was about the quiet disrespect, the manipulation disguised as modern values. The way Emily painted herself as enlightened while she danced on the ruins of their vows. So he began a different kind of transformation. He changed his wardrobe. Subtle shifts at first: sleeker jackets, tailored shirts, better shoes. Then came the gym. A real commitment this time. Personal trainer 3 times a week. Clean eating. Sleep schedules. He dropped the tired, distracted aura of a man trying to keep his marriage alive, and instead embraced something terrifyingly effective. The energy of a man who had nothing left to lose. And then, one by one, he began learning about the women in Emily's life. Jessica, the one who always said, "If I had a man like Michael," after 2 glasses of wine. Megan, the youngest in the circle, who admired Michael's calm demeanor. Sarah, the career woman who joked she'd trade all her independence for a weekend with someone emotionally stable. And Rachel, Emily's best friend since college, who once confided in Michael during a rough patch with her ex-husband and had never quite stopped texting since. He didn't pursue them. He made them pursue him. He didn't flirt. He observed. He listened. He remembered birthdays. He recommended books. When Jessica posted about finishing a difficult project at work, he sent a bottle of champagne, just to celebrate your success. When Rachel struggled with insomnia, he emailed her a podcast and a handwritten quote about resilience. When Megan had a photography exhibition, he showed up, alone, quietly proud. Dressed like a man who had rebuilt himself. They noticed. They all noticed. And Emily? She thought she was still in control. She thought her husband had accepted the new structure. That he was, perhaps, slowly warming to the idea. She saw his physical changes and told herself he was healing in his own way. She even complimented him in front of her friends. "My man's finally catching up," she'd say with a grin. "Told you it would work." She had no idea that behind that smile, Michael had already started dismantling everything she built, starting with the loyalty of the very women she considered her safety net. But Michael wasn't just playing a petty game. He was laying the foundation for something much darker. Emily's relationships were built on assumption that her friends would always support her, that her husband would never become a threat, that she could redefine their marriage, and he would either comply or quietly disappear into the background. But Michael was still very much present, and every act of kindness, every word of affirmation he delivered to the women she trusted most was a step deeper into her undoing. He didn't need to seduce them. He just needed them to question Emily's version of the truth. He planted seeds of doubt with surgical precision. A lingering glance here, a shared memory there, and most powerfully, he never bad-mouthed his wife. Not once. Because he knew that when betrayal came wrapped in silence, it screamed louder than any accusation. So when Jessica started texting him late at night, when Megan leaned in too close during coffee meetups, when Rachel brushed his arm and lingered just a second too long, it wasn't because Michael asked for it. It was because Emily had opened the door, and Michael had simply stepped through it, wearing a new suit and a smile they'd never seen before. The days that followed that night were a blur for Nathan. The world continued to spin meetings at the agency, phone calls, coffee breaks, endless emails, but his mind was somewhere else, stuck in a loop that replayed the scene in their bedroom like a cruel theater. He would sit at his desk, stare at spreadsheets, and instead of numbers, see three strange men, his wife laughing among them, her eyes sparkling not with guilt, but with liberation. He couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sent him back into alertness. Every soft thump from the hallway made his heart pound, wondering if Sophie was entertaining yet another guest. He hadn't asked. Not because he didn't care, but because part of him feared the answer would break what little was left of his sanity. Sophie, on the other hand, behaved as if everything was fine. She greeted him with her usual kiss on the cheek, asked about his day, and chatted about office gossip as though she hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in their marriage. Nathan responded with polite nods, short answers, and longer silences. On the fifth night after the revelation, he found her sitting at the dining table in their open-concept kitchen, scrolling her phone, sipping wine from a crystal glass. She wore his favorite silk robe, the one he'd bought for her anniversary 3 years ago. The irony didn't go unnoticed. "We need to talk," Nathan said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. Sophie glanced up. "Finally. I was wondering when you'd want to have a grown-up conversation." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You really think what you did is something we can discuss like adults?" "I think everything is open for discussion if we're brave enough." She crossed her legs. "Unless you want to keep sulking like a boy who lost his favorite toy." Nathan took a breath, controlled the heat rising in his chest. "You invited strangers into our home, into our bed. You didn't talk to me. You made the decision and expected me to accept it after the fact. And now you're calling me childish?" "You weren't listening, Nathan," she said. "You haven't been for years. You thought this marriage was perfect because it worked for you. But I was suffocating. You never said anything. You never asked." Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "So your solution was to sleep with other men and pretend that honesty afterward makes it noble?" "It's not about nobility. It's about truth. I want freedom. I want an open marriage." "And if I say no?" She stared at him, eyes steady. "Then maybe we don't have a marriage anymore." There it was. The ultimatum. Wrapped in silk and served in wine, but still a blade across the neck. Nathan stood. He walked to the living room window, stared out at the darkness, pooling over the quiet suburban street. Then he turned back. "You want an open marriage, Sophie? Fine. But here's what that means. Complete honesty. Full transparency. I get to explore, too. And I want to know about the people you bring into our life." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You're agreeing?" "I'm agreeing to your rules. Let's see how much you like them when I start playing." He left her sitting at the table, glass paused at her lips, her expression unreadable. That night, Nathan didn't sleep in the master bedroom. He took the guest room, locked the door, and lay awake crafting a mental nap. Sophie thought she had shocked him into silence, but all she'd done was awaken a strategist. Over the next week, he observed. He watched her texts light up her screen at all hours. He overheard snippets of conversations when she didn't know he was listening. Names like Connor, Ben, and Lucas came up more than once. She made plans out loud, clearly meant to be overheard. Brunch with the girls, late meetings, art shows he wasn't invited to. Nathan smiled politely and played dumb. Meanwhile, he reached out to a name he hadn't said aloud in years, Claire Winters. She was an old flame from college who had moved back to town last year. They had reconnected briefly on social media, exchanging pleasantries about careers and nostalgia. She was single now, working in education, and as sharp as ever. He messaged her. "Hey, Claire. Been a while. Want to catch up sometime?" She replied within an hour. "Would love to." Name the time and place. They met at a quiet wine bar near the waterfront. She looked radiant smarter, calmer, more grounded than Sophie had ever been. Their conversation flowed naturally, effortlessly. No manipulation, no secrets. Just two people who had once shared something warm, and maybe still could. Nathan didn't kiss her. Not yet. He wasn't ready. But when she touched his arm at the end of the night and said, "I always thought you were one of the good ones," he felt something crack open in him. Hope, maybe. Or just clarity. Back home, Sophie was waiting. She wore something tight, sheer, calculated. He noticed it, appreciated it even, but said nothing. "How was your night?" she asked, watching him closely. "Interesting," he said. "Good conversation. Good wine, you?" "Drinks with friends," she replied. "Lots of laughs." He nodded. "Glad we're both exploring." She stiffened slightly. "Exploring? You're seeing someone?" "I said I had good conversation, didn't I?" He smiled, leaned in close. "This is what you wanted, Sophie. I'm just following the rules." That night, he slept soundly. He'd accepted her war, but she was about to learn that he had better weapons. The evening air was thick with anticipation as Ryan adjusted his tie in the mirror of the hotel suite. The gala at the Whitmore Foundation was less than an hour away, and every detail had to be perfect. He wasn't attending as a guest. He was a featured honoree, recognized for his leadership in A security, and his recent philanthropic donation to fund digital literacy programs for underprivileged youth in the city. It was his first major public appearance since the divorce papers had been finalized and the media had caught wind of Ava S. scandal. Ryan's phone buzzed with a reminder. 8 p.m. to keynote address. He glanced at it, smirked, and slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. Tonight was about more than recognition. It was a line drawn in the sand, a moment to declare, with subtle elegance, that he had risen from the wreckage and remade himself. Downstairs, the ballroom shimmered in tones of navy and gold, filled with polished executives, city officials, and socialites who spoke in careful tones and shook hands like they were striking treaties. Ryan entered with calm confidence. Conversations shifted, heads turned. Some recognized him immediately. Others whispered his name in hushed tones. And then came the moment no one expected. Ava arrived. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure with calculated precision. Her hair was swept back, and her makeup was flawless. She walked into the gala as if she still owned the narrative, like she was still the wife of the man at the center of the room. But she wasn't. She was the outsider now, and her eyes widened slightly when they landed on Ryan, standing by the champagne table, effortlessly charming a trio of entrepreneurs. He caught sight of her, but didn't flinch. Instead, he turned slightly and smiled, not the kind of smile that said, "I still care," but the kind that declared, "Look who I became without you." Ava approached him, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. "Ryan," she said smoothly, as if nothing had happened. He turned, giving her the full force of his presence. "Ava, I wasn't expecting to see you here. I'm one of the keynote speakers, and I funded the new youth tech program. So, this is kind of my night." There was a flicker of something behind her eyes, shame, maybe, or realization. "You look successful," she said. He laughed softly. "I am. The pause between them stretched. "I made a mistake," she blurted, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Brian was never what I thought. I ended things." Ryan tilted his head. "You ended them before or after he was indicted?" Her lips parted, but no words came. The tension cut like ice between them. "I'm not here to punish you," he said calmly. "But I think you should understand something. I didn't just survive what you did to me. I rebuilt. And in doing so, I outgrew you." Her jaw tensed. "You don't mean that." "I mean every word." Suddenly, from across the room, a woman approached, stunning, poised, in a midnight blue gown. Her name was Elise Cho, a venture capitalist Ryan had met 6 months ago, whose wit matched his intellect, and whose calm steadiness had helped him heal. "Ryan, they're asking for you at the stage," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm. He turned to Ava, whose eyes darted between Elise and Ryan's hand. "Excuse me," he said. "Duty calls." As he walked away with Elise, Ava remained frozen, eyes locked on the man she had betrayed, now reborn into someone she couldn't touch. The past wasn't just behind him. It had just watched him walk away. The city was waking up, but Ava couldn't sleep. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the night pacing through the penthouse with no destination, haunted by her reflection in every mirror and window. Her hair was still perfectly styled, her silk robe pristine, but there was something hollow behind her eyes now, an absence she didn't yet know how to fill. Outside, the early morning sun painted long streaks of gold across the skyline, but inside the apartment, everything was cold. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of her footsteps across the marble floor. Last night's wine glass still sat on the counter, untouched since her return. The bottle next to it was half full, condensation beginning to form. She hadn't wanted to drink, not really. She had poured it more out of habit than desire, a gesture from a life that had revolved around show, not substance. Her fingers trembled as she picked up her phone. She wasn't expecting a message, but part of her hoped. Maybe Ryan had seen her expression at the party, had seen the flicker of regret. Maybe he'd text. Something. Anything. Nothing. Her inbox was a desert of silence. She scrolled back, pulling up the last message he'd ever sent her from 3 months ago. A simple, plain text. No punctuation. Just one question. "Did you mean it, Ava?" She hadn't replied. She hadn't even read it properly. She was still too far inside the illusion of her new life, the glittering socialite persona, the power lunches, the sponsored brand deals. Back then, silence had felt like power. Now it felt like punishment. The phone buzzed. Her heart stopped. But it wasn't Ryan. It was her lawyer. "We have an issue. The SHIAC has formally frozen Ryan Grant's accounts. Your name is tied to 3 asset transfers. They want to speak with you this week." Ava stared at the message. Her ears started to ring. She dropped the phone. Everything she'd built gone. The penthouse, the image, the leverage. Brian had promised her the world, but it had all been built on lies. She was never his partner. She was his puppet, his front. And now she was his shield. She gripped the edge of the kitchen island to keep herself from collapsing. She felt the panic clawing at her chest, rising into her throat. Her breath came in short gasps. She stumbled into the living room and sank onto the couch, wrapping her arms around her knees. A memory flickered. Ryan, sitting across from her on this very couch, offering her tea when she had a migraine. He had asked if she needed to talk. She had rolled her eyes and said, "I'm fine, just tired." He had smiled, a sad smile, like he already knew she wasn't coming back. She opened her messages again and started to type. "Ryan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I hurt you, but I need you to know. I'm sorry. I was blind, and I was cruel. And if I could undo it, I would." Her fingers hovered over the send button. Then she erased it. What was the point? Ryan had already moved on. That woman at the party, the way she laughed with him, the way he smiled at her like she mattered, that wasn't something casual. That wasn't a rebound. He wasn't just over Ava. He had rebuilt himself into someone she didn't recognize. Someone better. And she, the woman who once controlled every room she entered, was now the footnote, the afterthought, the one who gave up something real for something that evaporated in the first real storm. The penthouse suddenly felt suffocating. She stood up, ran to the balcony, and pushed the sliding door open. Cool morning air rushed over her face. She closed her eyes, trying to feel something real. But all she felt was regret. Regret that she never listened to Ryan, that she mocked his cabin dream, that she treated his love like it was disposable. She opened her laptop, searching his name. His old social media was barren, like a trail he no longer walked. But she found one thing, a tagged post. A candid shot of Ryan, shirt rolled up, lifting a beam of wood. Stronger, cleaner, focused. And beside him, that same woman. Caption, cabin coming together, with the best. That was when Ava knew she had lost him. Not to another woman, to another version of himself. One she never took the time to see. And now, she would never be invited back inside that version. Not with apologies, not with guilt, not with anything. He had done what she never thought he could. He healed. And this time, he healed without her. Michael's game was no longer just about revenge. It was about control, mastery, and poetic justice. His plan was unfolding exactly as intended, and now it was time to escalate. He had played the part of the wounded husband, the reborn man, the seductive new suitor, and now he was slipping into the final role, the architect of downfall. Emily believed she had redefined the rules of their relationship. But Michael wasn't just playing along. He was rewriting the entire game board beneath her feet. He started by deepening his connections with the 4 women who had once stood beside Emily. Jessica had already fallen. Rachel followed shortly after, lured by Michael's feigned intellectual curiosity and appreciation for literature. She adored his ability to quote poetry and discuss Kafka without sounding condescending. She felt seen and more dangerously special. Sarah proved more difficult. Her focus on career had made her wary, guarded, but Michael played the long game. He attended her speaking engagements, sent her thoughtful follow-up notes, and complimented her strategic thinking. When he offered to connect her with his firm's leadership for a potential collaboration, she agreed to meet for dinner. That night, over a candlelit table and a bottle of aged Bordeaux, her armor finally slipped. One kiss, then another. By the end of the week, Sarah was sending him texts that dripped with affection and longing. Megan was the easiest. Young, impulsive, still enchanted by older men with composed confidence. Michael had taken her to an art show one evening, introduced her to a few local gallery owners, and let her speak about her photography without interruption. She told him he was the first man who made her feel like her dreams weren't too childish. That same night, she kissed him under the neon glow of a street mural, and from there, things escalated. Through it all, Emily remained clueless. She saw only what she wanted to see, a husband who had finally embraced the open marriage fantasy. She mistook his calm demeanor and increased confidence for emotional progress. She congratulated herself on what she believed was a successful transformation of their relationship. She thought she'd won. She hadn't. Michael kept a meticulous journal documenting every interaction, photos, texts, times, places. Not because he planned to blackmail them, he didn't need to. The truth, when laid bare in the right moment, would be far more explosive than threats. The power of betrayal, when mirrored back at the betrayer, was enough to collapse a world. He just had to wait. And the opportunity came sooner than expected. One Friday evening, Michael returned home early from work. Emily was lounging on the couch in a silky robe, sipping red wine and scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up as he entered. "You're home early," she said casually. Michael smiled. "Meeting wrapped up quicker than expected. I thought we could have dinner." She stretched, clearly uninterested. "I've got plans. Marcus is picking me up in an hour." Of course she did. Michael didn't flinch. He simply nodded, walked over to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "That's fine," he said. "I actually wanted to talk to you about something anyway." Emily glanced at him, finally raising an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Jessica invited me to her place tomorrow. Wine tasting thing. She said you'd be fine with it." There it was, a deliberate, casual statement loaded with a ticking bomb. Emily blinked. "Jessica? She invited you?" "Yes, said you'd been encouraging me to expand my connections." Silence. Emily's expression twitched, the smallest shadow of discomfort passing over her eyes. "Well, I didn't mean with my friends." "Why not?" "They're attractive, confident, and already understand our dynamic." She laughed nervously. "It's just messy. Complicated." Michael stepped closer. "You wanted honesty, transparency, equality. I'm just doing what you asked." Emily didn't respond right away. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. She couldn't object, not without contradicting everything she'd said since their open marriage began. After a long pause, she said, "Fine. Just be careful, okay?" Michael smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and whispered, "Always." The next evening unfolded with eerie precision. Jessica had prepared a cozy evening, a private wine tasting in her loft with jazz playing softly in the background. She had dressed subtly seductive, her manner both nervous and excited. Michael played his part to perfection. He complimented her dress. He listened intently. He kissed her just enough to ignite emotion, but not enough to feel like a cheap thrill. And when Emily texted to check in, Jessica turned her phone over and ignored it. Michael stayed just long enough to solidify the illusion of romance, then left, citing a work call. Jessica didn't mind. She was already planning their next meeting. Back at home, Emily was waiting, glassy-eyed and jittery. "How was it?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Michael met her gaze calmly. It was enlightening. "Jessica's a fascinating woman." Emily said nothing, but her hand trembled slightly as she sipped her wine. The realization had begun to creep in. The game she thought she was controlling was slipping from her grasp. Her friends, her supporters, her cheerleaders, they were no longer hers alone. They were Michael's now, and the web was only just beginning to tighten. Michael had always believed that betrayal, once exposed, should be met with swift and decisive justice. But even justice, he had learned, is best served cold, calculated, and complete. He had spent the last 3 months executing a strategy so meticulously detailed that not even Emily, with all her bravado, had seen the full picture forming until it was too late. By the end of the 3rd week after Emily had kicked her own friends out of the house in a haze of rage and humiliation, her social circle had all but crumbled. Jessica had blocked her. Rachel stopped returning calls. Megan deleted her from every platform. Sarah issued a cold, professional message. "Please don't contact me again. It's better this way." Emily had tried to rebuild the shattered bridge with Michael, but she quickly discovered that the man she thought she could control had become a version of himself she didn't recognize. He was polite, cordial, even, but there was no warmth, no possibility of reconciliation. Every conversation was transactional, every touch point professional. And then came the letter. It was hand-delivered. Michael had taken great care to ensure Emily received it on a Tuesday afternoon when she was most likely to be alone. The envelope was elegant, thick cream paper with her name in embossed script. Inside, a single-page letter in Michael's precise, architectural handwriting. Emily, thank you for showing me who you truly are. I thought I had lost everything, but in truth, you set me free. This is your notice of final separation. My attorney has filed for divorce effective immediately. The documents you will receive in the next 48 hours are non-negotiable. You wanted freedom. Now you have it. I'm moving out by the end of the week. Everything I leave behind is yours to remember me by. Good luck with your new life. You'll need it, Michael. That night, Emily broke. She trashed the bedroom in a storm of fury and tears, sobbing into the Egyptian cotton sheets that once symbolized intimacy and now smelled of loneliness and regret. She called Michael 6 times. He never answered, but he wasn't ignoring her. He was flying to Dallas. His transfer to the Dallas branch of his company had been quietly secured weeks before. The new position came with more freedom, more autonomy, and a fresh start far from the poisoned echoes of Oakwood Lane. He had already found a sleek apartment overlooking the city skyline. Clean lines. No memories, just silence and peace. Emily, meanwhile, descended. Her reputation, once a crown she wore proudly, had been shredded. The same friends who once cheered her on now whispered behind her back. Her clients at the marketing agency began to dwindle as rumors leaked. Eventually, she was let go. Officially due to restructuring, but unofficially because no one trusted someone who had become a pariah in her own community. By month 5, she was working part-time at a boutique store downtown. No more high heels and luxury handbags. Now it was discount rack dresses and customers who barely noticed her. Michael watched from afar, not with cruelty, but with clarity. He had no desire for revenge anymore. That flame had burned out. What remained was a cold understanding that people like Emily never expected consequences. She had gambled everything on the assumption that he would break, submit, or beg. But he had done none of those things. He had risen, and that terrified her. One evening in Dallas, as Michael sipped wine on his balcony, watching the city shimmer in the dusk, he received a message. A number he didn't recognize. "Hi, it's me. I saw your interview on LinkedIn. You look ... happy." He stared at the screen for a moment, then locked his phone and walked inside. No reply. He had made his final play, and it was checkmate. 3 weeks after filing for divorce, Jason stood outside the family courthouse, waiting for his attorney to finish a brief call before they entered the final mediation session. The winter wind whipped around him, brisk and biting, yet he felt strangely calm. The man who had once been broken inside, the man who had stood frozen watching his wife sleep with other men in their own bedroom, was gone. In his place stood someone harder, smarter, but also more at peace. Inside the courthouse, Lauren sat alone at the defendant's table, wearing a navy coat far too big for her diminished frame. Her makeup, once perfectly sculpted for every social event, was hastily applied as if she no longer cared. Her phone sat face down beside her, notifications lighting it up with names that no longer mattered. Rachel, Tara, Megan, once so loyal, now distant. Jason had taken everything from her, not out of cruelty, but as a lesson. And she finally understood the cost of her betrayal. When the mediator entered the room and called both parties forward, Jason remained silent, letting his lawyer do the talking. The terms were already agreed upon. Jason would retain ownership of the house, their investment portfolio, and the vehicles. Lauren would receive a modest alimony, enough to live, but not enough to thrive. She had lost her marketing position due to office gossip, and her once vibrant circle of friends had gone silent. None of the men she had entertained came to her defense. They had fled like shadows at dawn. As the mediator recited the agreement and asked each party for confirmation, Lauren looked at Jason. "I never thought it would come to this," she said softly. Jason met her gaze without emotion. "Neither did I, but you made your choice." A few hours later, as he sat in his car outside the courthouse, The final document sealed in a folder beside him, Jason didn't feel the triumphant rush he once imagined. There was no music, no victory dance, just silence and clarity. Revenge had given him closure, but not peace. That would come later. 2 months passed. Jason sold the house they had bought together and moved into a sleek apartment on the 40th floor of a luxury building in downtown Seattle. Gone were the wedding photos, the couple's mugs, the memories pressed between couch cushions and bedroom drawers. His new place was minimalist, curated cold to some, but to Jason, it was freedom. It was during a charity auction for a local tech literacy foundation that he met Elise. She stood at a table reviewing silent bids for a travel package to Japan. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her smile wasn't forced. It was genuine. She wore a deep green dress that complemented her confidence more than her figure, and when Jason introduced himself, she shook his hand like someone used to building her own path. Their conversation began with Tokyo and Kyoto, wandered through Vietnamese poetry, and landed somewhere between career dreams and family expectations. Elise was a software engineer by trade, a pianist by passion. Jason found himself laughing in a way he hadn't in years, not out of performance, but because Elise made the world lighter, and most importantly, she made no demands of him, no ultimatums, no manipulations, only presence. Their first date was quite a lakeside walk and coffee from a food truck. Their second, a rooftop dinner under string lights. Each moment was healing in disguise. And when Elise asked about his past, Jason didn't hide it. He told her the truth, not the whole sordid tale, but the parts that shaped him. Elise didn't flinch. "It sounds like you finally learned what you won't tolerate," she said. "That's powerful." 6 months later, they stood on a hiking trail overlooking the Olympic Peninsula. Jason had brought a small velvet box in his jacket pocket, unsure until that exact moment whether he would use it. But as Elise laughed, brushing hair from her wind-kissed face, he realized he wasn't just moving on. He was building something better. "Elise," he said, heart steady, "would you build something with me?" Her eyes widened, not in surprise, but in knowing. "Only if we build it together." And just like that, the man who had been betrayed became the man who had risen. Not because he sought vengeance, but because he learned to choose himself, and then to choose someone who chose him too. The crisp autumn air swept through the city of Denver as Nathan stood before a tall glass building, the morning sun casting long beams across the pavement like golden threads pulling him forward. He adjusted the lapel of his charcoal blazer, took a steadying breath, and stepped through the rotating doors of Whitestone Ventures. A new role, a new chapter. A life no longer defined by betrayal, but by purpose. 6 months had passed since the courtroom gavel slammed down, dissolving the remains of a marriage that once promised forever. In that time, Nathan had quietly built a new foundation, brick by brick, meeting by meeting, day by determined day. The man who once stood hollow in the ruins of his trust was now grounded by resilience, anchored by the truth that pain doesn't end a story, it simply turns the page. His new job as a strategic technology advisor allowed him to mentor rising startups and implement systems that helped businesses scale efficiently. But more than the salary or the corner office, Nathan relished something deeper, the clarity. In his past life with Elise, so much had been noise performing perfection, enduring indifference, compensating for betrayal he couldn't yet name. Now, every step he took was intentional, every decision his own. And then there was Claire. She wasn't someone he expected. That was probably why she felt so right. They had met at a community board meeting of all places, where Nathan had volunteered to help local youth programs transition to digital learning tools. Claire was the city's civic tech liaison, sharp-witted, kind-eyed, and unapologetically passionate about social impact. At first, their connection was professional, collaborative, respectful. But as weeks passed, something undeniable bloomed between lines of project plans and late-night problem-solving sessions. Claire laughed with her whole heart. She listened like it mattered. And when she told a story, her voice held that rare combination of strength and softness that made you want to believe again. She wasn't interested in fixing him. She was simply curious about who he had become. That was the magic. On their 5th date, Nathan had finally opened up about the past, not all the painful details, but enough for her to see the scar beneath his calm. Claire didn't flinch. She simply took his hand across the dinner table and said, "You don't owe anyone your old story, just the one you're writing now." It was the most freeing thing he'd ever heard. One crisp Sunday, they drove into the Rockies for a quiet retreat. The cabin, tucked among whispering pines and surrounded by golden aspens, felt like a sanctuary carved from silence. That night, as they sat beneath a sky littered with stars, Claire leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. "I don't want perfect," she whispered. "I just want something real." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "Then we're finally in the right place." Back in the city, the fallout from Elise's choices continued to unfold like a cautionary tale among their former social circle. Friends who once envied her confidence now saw the cracks in her curated life. Her attempts to rekindle lost friendships were often met with polite distance. The men she had once entertained moved on quickly, unburdened, unattached. Elise, once the queen of control, now found herself at the mercy of loneliness she had designed with her own hands. Nathan hadn't spoken to her since the court date. There was no need. Everything that needed saying had been delivered through action, through boundaries, through walking away. Yet one afternoon, as he picked up a coffee from the bookstore cafe near his office, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Nathan?" He turned. Elise stood a few feet away, wrapped in a too-thin coat for the season, hair pulled into a hasty ponytail, eyes more tired than he remembered. She held a book she clearly wasn't buying, just holding. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. He nodded once. "I work nearby." They stood in awkward silence for a beat. "You look well," she added, voice thin. Nathan gave a small smile. "I am well." A pause. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I was wrong. About everything." He didn't respond, and the silence that followed said what words could not. I wanted you to know," she whispered. "I miss who we were, who you were." Nathan exhaled slowly. "I'm not that man anymore." With a respectful nod, he turned and walked away, coffee in hand, heart steady. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. And Nathan had already made his. That evening, Claire welcomed him home with a kiss that held no agenda, just affection. They made dinner together, barefoot in the kitchen, trading stories and seasoning with laughter. And when Nathan looked into her eyes, he didn't see the ghost of what he'd lost, only the promise of everything he had found.